It's always a pleasure to appear before this committee, and a pleasure particularly to appear before Senator McCrory and Representative Leeper. Although I think that Senator McCrory ought to follow the lead of Representative Poulos and Representative Biggins and start wearing bow ties. Just a suggestion. Look, SEEK submitted some really extensive testimony in written form. There's no way we can cover it in 3 minutes. My colleagues, Naomi Nova, John Flanders, and Stacy Taee will be testifying later on different aspects of it, but we're still not going to cover it all. I hope that members of the committee will have a chance to look at our full testimony. The first point that we all seem to agree on is there's a need for out-of-district placement. There are some severely disabled students who cannot be educated in their home districts. And there are others, perhaps, who could be educated in their home districts if appropriate programs were set up. So doing so takes seed money, and that seed money has to be non-year money. It can't be money that has to be spent in the current year. It takes bonding authority to expand spaces available, and it takes incentives to have districts work together to build those programs. All three elements have to be part of that. Now, the governor goes further and proposes that the Department of Education set rates for private providers. You've heard articulate testimony in the last few minutes about why that's a bad idea from the point of view of the schools. From the point of view of the taxpayer, it's a bad idea too. Rate setting is highly expensive, necessitating the creation of a mini public utility commission staffed with auditors and accountants. Massachusetts has such a system, and it turns out that the rate for similar schools in Massachusetts is actually higher than the rate for similar schools in Connecticut. If rates are set too low, however, as happened in New York, a lot of private schools go out of business or stop taking kids placed under IEPs. The result is, in many cases, that parents unilaterally place, sue the districts, and it ends up costing the districts substantially more money. Now, special ed directors are extremely reluctant to outplace kids. When they do so, however, they have no bargaining power, however, with the private placements. They need the placement, and they'll pay whatever is being asked. So here's my proposal. Instead of a rate-setting system, the state ought to negotiate rates with the private providers. That way we're assured that the rates are not going to be so low that the programs go out of business, but at the same time, the state provides some downward pressure on rates. And as I said in a prior hearing, the reason costs have gone up so high is pretty clear, which is that if you're a private school and you're entering into a contract to meet the IEP needs of a kid, you've got to have the staff on board. And since there's been a staff shortage, the private schools have had to pay a lot more, to provide the staff. That's not true for public schools. For public schools, they have to provide the services, or they have to provide for the child, and in many cases, services are not being provided because of lack of staff. And to summarize,
that's my guy.
CSDE proposes that private providers have to fix their rates before December 31st. That means that there's substantial risk of increased costs between December 31st and the beginning of the school year, and so the rates they set are going to be artificially high. It is inherently an inflationary proposal. Now, it does provide convenience for school district budgeteers, but I think the inflationary impact of that proposal far outweighs the convenience that's involved. Look, SEEK is here to work with you on this and work with the Select Committee to make special ed as good as it could possibly be, given the constraints that we have, and we're glad to continue to work with you.
Good. All right, and I mean, I can ask you questions all night, but I'm not going to do that. I'd rather work with you and see if we can find a solution to this problem. Honestly, I really would like to have you at the table when we discuss this issue. Any questions for my colleague, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming. I just have one quick question because you're talking about outplacement. I'm actually going through I have your information right in front of me. And one of your statements or bullets says monitoring out of district placements, including RESC. Are RESC not, and you talk about how you you just said things have skyrocketed, without doubt, we all know that. But you said neither Connecticut State Department of Education or local school districts regular monitor whether services are being provided as stipulated. You were just talking about the IEP. And by the student's IEP, whether the services are high quality, what they are getting their bang for their buck, could you just expand on that
Okay, so
briefly?
as was pointed out by a prior witness, CSDE does have an approval process where after a year of being in business, a school has to be approved to be a approved private special education program, and APSEP. I know you were looking for more abbreviations to use, and that's a good one. Okay, good. And then there's a reapproval process that's periodic, and there's a single staff person at CSDE who does that. And if the school, for example, wants to increase the number of students, they have to go back for an approval process. But it's not a regular review, and it's not a review as against the student's IEP. Now, I talk to a lot of special ed directors who place kids, and they all say they would love to go visit and go see what's going on in these programs. And they do when they can, but they don't have time. They don't have staff to do that. And so the review, each kid who's outplaced has to have his IEP reviewed once a year, and at the once a year mark, they review the reports from the school as to whether IEP goals and objectives are being met and how they need to be modified. But that's not the sort of review that would allow us to see whether the programs are really high quality. It's not the type of review that takes place on internal special ed programs.
Thank you. And could you just talk about the RESC?
There are 6 regional educational service centers in
I
the
know what
state.
they are, but you
Yeah.
said they didn't have the oversight. I
They
just
have,
wanted to
right,
understand that.
They are not subject to the same approval process as private schools. They're consortiums of local school districts, so they run programs. It's, in my view, they ought to be treated the same as the private schools for purposes of oversight. They take a huge proportion of the outplaced kids. Their costs are comparable, maybe a little higher in some cases, and they ought not to be immune because they're these quasi-public entities.
I would agree. So if whoever provides those services should be on the same playing field. Maybe they do different things and that's different, but whatever services are provided, everybody, in my opinion, should be on the same playing field. So.
And let me just be clear, my perception, which is limited, is that the RESCs provide very high quality programs generally.
And I'm not saying they don't.
So I'm not saying that they don't either, that's all.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you again, Andrew, for your testimony, and I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.